what would the words be that keep you moving towards those goals? And we can start with you, Taylor. How would you articulate the why behind what you do?
The why behind what I do. Well, man, the easiest way probably for me to articulate the actual why, not as much the verbiage, but the why is, I had my life a number of years ago kind of come off the rails, both, a little bit, very much personally and, professionally, really made me pivot. And I had the opportunity in life to slow down and get healthy. And I know that not everybody has the time. I had, half a year to just focus on myself. And so my why became wanting to give the transformation that I have to so many others who maybe don't have the time, money, energy, or effort to go, hey, I'm just going to pause life for a year, or may not even see the need. So my why is helping people, coming alongside, partnering with them for transformation in their life to achieve their goals. That's what I love to do. And so that's kind of the bigger, broader strokes. And then if we get into like the specifics and the details, it's all the same in business. Wanting transformation in whatever they're doing to achieve the vision that they have for themselves and the goals that they have for themselves. So I know that life can be really, really hard. And I think if we're honest, like if we're actually honest, it's way harder most of the time than maybe we even let on. But I love getting messy with people. That's my favorite thing. That's my favorite thing. So yeah, that's kind of my heart and my passion is really like transformation at a core level. And I believe that healthy humans can have healthy teams. And healthy teams can lead to healthy businesses. That's kind of the premise of the whole deal. So that's my why in a nutshell.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that resonates with, I think you said, your story. I think that's where we see a lot of these missions and these visions birthed, and then they grow and they develop as we start to see the rubber meet the road of how we can actually help other people achieve those things. So you have one conversation that you see actually set someone a little bit more free or unlock something new in them, and you start to realize maybe this is actually something that God can use to change the lives of the people around me. So I think that that's awesome. I think that's huge.
Thanks. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the Celebrate Recovery world. If you're not familiar with it, it's a Christian-based 12-step program. And I like it because one of the sayings, they have a lot of cheesy sayings, and my wife would say, "You're really good at cheesy sayings." Thank you. I'll own that. Is like, hey, your mess will become your message. Right. And you can take that in there and go, okay, alcohol, anxiety, depression, sex addiction, whatever it is, name that. But I think that is really true, is that like, if you allow it, our greatest source of pain can often be where we're going to actually produce the most in life for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard it said too, that crushing can produce that fine olive oil, or it can produce that wine. But there is this process of crushing that often happens. And sometimes the crushing is intentional and you're leaning into something tough. And sometimes it's just life. It's just being a human on planet Earth and existing in this world, and that can really crush you. But there can be something very valuable produced from that if you're willing to take note and to kind of lean into that direction. So I think that's so encouraging for a lot of people, especially at the start of a new year. It's not like our whole life resets on December 31st, but there is something about a new year. Yeah, there's something about it. So I like that. What about you, Brad? How would you articulate the why and just kind of what keeps you moving forward? And I know for both of you, something I've thought a lot about is the risks that you take. And we were talking about this before we hit record. These risks have very real price tags of starting your own business and stepping out into, something brand new. So what kind of keeps you moving forward on some of those things, especially when it gets tough?
Yeah, this is such a fun topic, and risk in particular is very interesting to me. In fact, my previous employer is a mentor and friend of mine named Aaron. I remember one day we were talking about a particularly difficult deal that he was working on as a commercial real estate deal, and he said, "Brad, risk is a spiritual principle." And like, without getting into details, like if you knew the number of zeros that he was referencing, like when he was talking about that, you'd be like, yeah, this is like God better be real sort of moment. Right.
Yeah.
And he better like me as well. Mm-hmm. I better be on his good side.
Yes.
And what's interesting is when you have someone else's money in particular, like in the context of business, a lot of times we're talking about money, right? Mm-hmm. When you have someone else's money, it's a function of stewardship, right? Like, okay, I'm stewarding someone else's money. It's not mine. Therefore, ... When you're stewarding your own money, right? Which, from our standpoint, like, as with the Bible as our guide, we understand that like all of the good things that we have in our life, including our financial resources, are a gift from God. The fear and the anxiety and the implications around what happens if things don't go the way that they're supposed to, like, i.e., there's no return on that money, right? It just feels differently. The weight sits differently. And I think for some people, it's probably heavier when it's someone else's money. And for others, it's probably heavier when it's your own. But that's really what the last year has been like for me. It's been feeling how the weight of your own financial risk sits differently than the weight of someone else's financial risk. And it's still risky either way. The risk calculation is no different. It's just, where does the pain and the suffering and when things don't go well, where does it land, right? Where does that weight sit? And so I think that it's important to just like recognize, as scary as that downside risk is, we also have to measure upside risk. And that's something that we oftentimes don't talk about when we talk about risk. We don't talk about what happens if I don't do this.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, there became a little bit of a different weight in late 2023 when I made my transition out of my full-time job to do this coaching thing. And consultancy in the podcast. It was what becomes of Brad if Brad doesn't take this risk? Yeah. What becomes of the people that Brad has the potential to influence and be of use to, of service to, if I don't take this risk? And that weight and that downside risk became scarier to me than the financial implications, right? Which, thankfully my kids aren't, old enough to know what's happening with dad's money right now. Right. But my wife certainly
Becca
knows, and she's feeling those tensions, as a newly as a mom of 3. And so, but we're also experiencing the benefit, the blessing, and the joy of making a real difference in the lives of anywhere from, 40 to 50 people at a time who we're working with. And in addition to hopefully the people who are experiencing value from our podcast. And so I think that the upside risk is where we need to put our attention, and we need to look at, hey, what can happen if we go take this risk? Like what's possible? What new future can we create, and how can we help the people that, will benefit from it? So that's something I would offer up for us to consider with risk. I don't know if you guys would add anything to that. You've both certainly taken risks as well in the last year that are different. And I just think it's important that we talk about the upside as well as the downside, when the downside is the part that we're always drawn to that fear and to that anxiety and to the what ifs. But like, what if it works? Like, what if this daily leader thing works? What if Pattern Talent and Bara Coaching and more? What if these things all work? And what if like we actually change just a small part of the world for the better? Yeah. Like, what are we going to do? What's going to happen then?
Yeah. What do you do if it works? Yeah. Well, and I think I have a unique perspective on this because I've been a beneficiary. So about this time last year, and it would have been a little bit before because we did some planning before we actually launched the Daily Leader. But I remember I was on a work trip in California for the nonprofit that I was working for at the time. And you and I had briefly talked about this podcast network, you maybe having a podcast. And at that time, I had a ton of people who would ask me all the time, and you guys might be starting to have this too. When someone knows that you have a podcast and that episodes actually keep releasing somehow magically, then they ask you how to do it themselves. And like, what does that look like? And and you're like, it's not actually what you think it is.
This is going to suck for you.
It's actually very different. It's not not as widespread as it might sound, even though it sounds really good because we have a great producer named Luke. It is, it's kind of
Thank you,
small
Luke.
behind the scenes. Yeah. And so I remember you and I had a phone conversation, and this was at that point when you were making that change from kind of your steady 9 to 5 to this dream and this mission of I want to empower leaders, and this is the goal that I'm going after, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I was laughing yesterday with Elise because whenever you were talking with me, I was not really ready to launch the network, but you were ready to launch the podcast. Therefore, the network had to launch for the podcast to happen.
Correct.
And it all happened. I remember Googling like how to write a contract or like, what am I supposed to do? How do you build an invoice? All of it kind of happened at the same time. And I think that I have gotten to be a beneficiary of that because you guys pay me every month and Luke to make sure that this show is releasing, and really without any promise of like, we're going to get you this many listeners. We never promise viral. It's great when that one social post goes viral, but
Thank you. Yes.
it doesn't,
Love
the return on investment is it's different. And we'll talk about that in a bit, but just, I think, to make that comment that I've gotten to be on the other side of you taking that risk and investing in someone around you, because this network wouldn't, I don't think, be here if the Daily Leader hadn't launched. And there were a lot of months, especially the early months, where it's like, what are we doing? Is this right? Is this wrong? We still don't know, really. But here we are, a whole season in, and I think it was worth it. So thank you. If I haven't said it, thank you to you both for actually making this thing happen.
Yeah, our pleasure. That's what we said at Chick-fil-A. It's our pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
Nikki, I mean, I'm just so glad. Like, I'm so glad that you took that risk. I'm so glad Brad helped nudge you over the edge, and yet you still had to take the risk. And Brad, I go back. Sometimes you do ask some really good questions, and I wrote that one down. What happens if I don't do this? And that was like penetrating to my soul of like, yeah, what happens if I don't take the risk? Like, not even ROI, but what happens internally for me if I don't take the risk on myself to see where this goes? Like, I just wonder, Nikki, in your situation, like, hey, I wonder, like what would have happened if you didn't take the risk?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Clearly, the Daily Leader and our, 500,000 subscribers.
Yeah, the millions and millions that tune in every Tuesday. Yeah.
You guys, all the people that, they all listen within the first hour that it drops too. It's amazing.
There's Joe Rogan, and then there's the Daily Leader, and it's pretty big.
Andrew Huberman's down there
Andrew
somewhere.
Huberman,
whatever,
yeah.
He's okay.
Yeah.
But really, you took that risk. I just think that's a great question to flip it on its head, because, like you said, Brad, as humans, we like instinctively gravitate towards fear and staying safe. Totally. Or, as we've talked about on the podcast, perceived safety. Like, maybe not even what is safe, but what I perceive to be safe. And truthfully, we're probably no safer. There is some risk, right? Of course, you could lose some money, you can get embarrassed, but like life or death wise, I think it makes more sense to take a risk on ourselves than it does to not, even just the intrinsic value. So anyways, both of you, I'm grateful for the risks both of you are taking, because Brad, you've spoken plenty of life into me too, and challenged and encouraged me, and are always like, why are you not doing more? You need to be doing more, not less. Like, take more risks. Like,
it's the name of the network.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it is the More Network. There it is. And you guys you both challenge me so much, because like I said, I get the opportunity to listen in as you're kind of working through things. And it's been pretty incredible to watch this last year, what started as this podcast and has now grown to, and this is kind of what we can talk about next, is now growing into this community. It's this bigger thing. It's this whole space for leaders. It's not just something that you tune into, that we just are filling space on a Tuesday with, but it's actually growing and changing. And it's been really interesting to watch as you guys have started to move more in that direction. And then you guys, you freak me out. You do all these, you change things and you start things, and it's like I can be a very consistent person. So I've got this beautiful season laid out for us, and then it's like, well, what if we do this and we add this and we change this? And so I mean, it's been so encouraging to me to watch you guys do that, and inspiring to me, because the two of you are a lot more like Scott than I am. And so, I mean, even in coming on to this like second year of the network, I am just now realizing that there are team members that now I'm responsible for and that I want to support, and that it's bigger than just me doing this fun side project with my friend Brad. It's become this whole group of people that now I'm really invested in how this thing grows, because I care about you guys and I want it to go well, which adds a little bit more fire under my feet to make sure that then we're doing the best job that we can.